All right, so the curtain has fallen on the January 6th committee's first round of hearings, and now the big question is, now what? So the committee has made clear they're going to resume hearings in September. We know that as much, but what happens between now until then? Now, in a sense, it really is our turn, and I speak here as a member of the media. We in the news media and you at home have a responsibility to take everything that has been presented and work to understand what exactly it means. Not just in this quick knee-jerk manner that happens so often in the minutes after one of the hearings wraps, but also in a deeper sense, when all the pieces of the puzzle can come together. Let's listen to Liz Cheney this week in her closing statement about this.
Every American must consider this. Can a president who is willing to make the choices Donald Trump made during the violence of January 6th ever be trusted with any position of authority in our great nation again?
There's probably nothing that I agree with Liz Cheney on, but how do we take what she just said there? How do we build off of that sentiment from Congresswoman Cheney? And it starts with the facts and a warning. Mother Jones D.C. Bureau Chief David Corn, who's going to join me in just a minute, reminds us that Trump and his allies have actually escaped accountability before, when they were in a similar position during the Russia investigation, and you may remember that. David Corn wrote at the time, Trump and his comrades have been rather deft at developing a tactic to protect him from charges of profound wrongdoing. They raised the bar. There was plenty of confirmed evidence that Trump and his crew acted in a sleazy and improper manner, yet Trump and his protectors defined the scandal in different terms. Did he collude with the Kremlin? When special counsel Robert Mueller reported he had not found evidence that Trump criminally conspired with the Russians, Trump and his cult declared he had been cleared. Even though Mueller's final report documented his misdeeds and detailed numerous instances in which Trump possibly obstructed justice. No collusion equals no culpability. That is how Trump managed to reshape the Russia scandal. So how do we make sure that Trump and his cronies do not escape accountability this time? This is the great challenge we in the news media and you at home face. We cannot let Trump's allies or our own imaginations dictate the terms of the January 6th committee's findings. The facts and only the facts, must tell that story. Because the moment we step away from the facts, we are letting the other side dictate the rules of the game. And guess what? The facts are pretty freaking damning. So as we wait for the committee to hold more hearings, all of us, myself included, must make sure the committee's findings, and only their findings, tell that damning story. It's not about coming up with the biggest or the worst Trump conspiracy imaginable. It's about telling the real story of what happened before, after, and on January the 6th. We have to let the facts do the work and call out the lies and obfuscation on the other side. And then maybe, just maybe, the people who need to be held accountable will actually and finally be held accountable for what they have done to our country. Joining me now is David Corn, Mother Jones D.C. Bureau Chief and an MSNBC political contributor and the author of the forthcoming book, American Psychosis, a historical investigation of how the Republican Party went bonkers. David, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on the show. Talk about your piece and your fears that a similar framing could befall the January 6th committee, because if we know one thing, the Republicans are good at reframing the facts to try and make it say it's not what you think it is, it's something completely different.
Yes, and I will say that I wrote that piece before the last hearing, which I think changes things a little bit. But the big question here is there's so much on the public record we know already, and yet we often get diverted, deflected into other questions like, will Trump be prosecuted? Well, did he break the law? What's going to happen with investigations out of the Justice Department? And you have on the other side, on Trump's own side, saying things like it was a wonderful rally. That's what we're focused on. And we're not going to talk about what happened afterwards. Trump wasn't involved in what happened. He ended up not going to the riot on Capitol Hill. So what they try to do is create a definitional debate where he is innocent because you're closely sort of defining the terms and you're narrowing the perspective. Now, what the committee did, I think, directly to try to address this is focus this last hearing on Thursday night on one key element. I mean, there are lots of different parts of the January 6th story. And I think up before the committee hearings, it was hard for a lot of Americans to absorb the full picture and to understand everything in spades. But what they did on Thursday night was to focus on one key fact, 187 minutes between the end of his speech and when he said something about ending the riot. What did Trump do in that time period? The answer is nothing. And they showed a very strong case that he did nothing on purpose. There wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. He wanted this violence to continue because it was serving his ends, his purpose of delaying and maybe even putting off entirely the certification of the electoral count that was going on in the Senate and the House. So if you took away everything else, the call to Georgia to try to get him extra votes, the fake electors, the conspiracy theories, pressuring the Justice Department, pressuring Mike Pence. If you took away everything else and just thought about that moment when this guy, it's his job to defend the Constitution and the U.S. government, did not do his job, you will see that no other president has ever engaged in such reckless dereliction of duty. And the committee really focused on that, I think, to sort of find a through line here, that it doesn't matter whether this was a crime or whether he's prosecuted or not. And so I think they did a good job of directing our attention and focusing our attention. Of course, the news media and the news ecosystem as well as anyone, Eamon. We get very distracted, and it's very hard to keep focused on anything for a long period of time. So what will be done with this information is really entirely an open question.
All right, so let me pick up on that point as a member of the press and give it to us straight. Do you think that the news media in its totality is up for the challenge of pushing back against the GOP narratives, not just in terms of how they spin the facts or the events of that day, but when you have people like Mike Pence or Condoleezza Rice saying the Democrats just want to focus on one day in January, it's time to move on, it's time to look forward, and trying to kind of frame this as like something years ago and we should stop obsessing over it?
I think that's the strong point here. Now that we have this record, now that there's been more to the record added by the Thursday hearing, and I assume there'll be more to come, it's up to the media to decide how important this is and how much attention to pay to it and what to do when one side wants to try to spin its way out of it. I mean, they're very good. We see our NBC and MSNBC colleagues chasing after members of the House and Senate, Republican members, and trying to get them to comment on this. And they go, I'm not talking about this. I don't care about this. This is the past. This is what Mike Pence said the other day. I'm not focused on the past. Well, excuse me. Every criminal trial in America is about the past. And if you're running for office, Mike Pence for president, say, or Donald Trump again, and you're not going to talk about this most tragic and horrific day in American history that you were a part of, well, then why should anyone take you seriously? And I think it is hard. It's hard for us in the press to keep asking the same question again and again and again, particularly when people like Mitch McConnell just say, I'm not going to answer the question. You kind of feel in some ways, perhaps, that you look a little obsessive, a little silly, or maybe even unfair. Right? Which is what they want you to look like, which is what they want you to feel. Right. And so, I mean, I think, every Republican should be asked what they think about Liz Cheney and, her statement that you just, played earlier, and what they think about what happened Thursday night. They are just trying to duck and cover. At the very beginning of the hearings, we had Republicans saying they were going to create a truth squad and respond to what was going on in the hearings and fight back the way we saw them do in the impeachments and other investigations. And then they decided, no, we're not going to say anything. We're not going to show up outside and try to grab the microphone. We're not going to go rushing to Fox News and say this, that, or the other thing, or give interviews to you on MSNBC or go on CNN. They just laid low because they thought that if they do that, they create less conflict and that this, they take the hit and then it evaporates. The media is very good at letting things evaporate because if no one else is saying anything, you don't know how to cover it because you covered it already once. And so the challenge to, I think, the media is to try to figure out how to keep this center stage while there are, of course, other things going on in the world.